welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is Judith Lukin, speaking on writing as a means of self-empowerment. Judith describes herself as a thinker, questioner, and observer of human behavior. Bob and I think of her as a beautiful human being who's bright and lovely and brings integrity to all that she does. Judith is an accomplished educator and community organizer. She has master's degrees in both adult education and social work with a solid background in sociology and psychology. She is fascinated by why people do what they do and how they present themselves in the world. Judith loves learning. Her interests include social justice, critical thinking, ethics, language, creativity, and cultures. She's journaled both diary style and therapy style, written love and lust and other poetry, composed short pieces based on real-life happenings, created an annual holiday letter, crafted haikus. She's enjoyed reading, making jewelry, having good conversations, and serving as an academic writing facilitator and coach for women in college or graduate school who have experienced incarceration in the past. Judith has been writing and facilitating adult learning for many years. She's designed many staff development and training workshops, an academic writing course, and a circle of life planning which helps participants develop action plans in one or more of 8 aspects of life: health, family, home, leisure and social life, learning, work, money, and service. Judith's courses are available upon request. Judith, welcome. Hi.
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Wonderful.
Good morning, Judy.
Good morning.
You could join us.
My pleasure.
You know, Judy, I neglected to mention that you have had a long career being an advisor and a teacher and adjunct professor at universities. Segueing from that career into your current work doing your blog, could you tell us something about your journey of where you are now in life and work?
Well, I think I'm going to go far back and say that my greatest influence was my parents, who taught me to read, which opened up a world of imagination for me and taught me to love learning, which fed my curiosity and sent me to nature camp, started a Campfire Girls group for me and my friends to give service, and took me to music school to learn piano and theory and sent me for dance lessons. So that was the early part. And then how I helped to grow myself was I was smart enough to join great organizations doing good things. So I went to Toastmasters to learn how to do public speaking. I took an Ira Progoff intensive journal workshop to teach myself journaling that wasn't diary journaling. I took, as you know, the Barbara Share Success Team with Andrea Reese, who's a great photographer, and I joined the New York Writers Coalition to do my own writing, and I was part of Aegis, which was where I got my master's degree at Columbia in adult education, and that was altogether kind of launched me because the music school actually taught me more about social justice. And the Aegis program, my favorite professor there, Jack Mesro, asked a question that just haunted me. He asked, does adult education matter, or is it all politics in the end?
That's an excellent question.
And, and I was just so fascinated by that. I mean, I decided my answer is that adult education does matter, and it matters a lot. So I think that's what brought me into this career of being a thought partner in my practice, which is called Inspired Outcomes, and creating the 2 courses I did, one of which is the Circle of Life Planning course, and the other is called Grow Your Grammar. And it's the Grow Your Grammar course that I teach with formerly incarcerated women who are now in college.
Beautiful. That is so wonderful. As I listen to you, Judy, it occurs to me that I have a strong sense that you have enjoyed what you've done through life And
every little moment.
You've chosen. You've been very conscious and very aware. I know one of your, main tenets is the ability to engage in critical thought. And you mentioned your dancing, your music, and so much that you've done in your writing. Tell us a little bit more how you've used that for yourself and for your students as a process to self-discovery and self-awareness, and how it's impacted the way you live your life and what you've helped your students learn through their writing.
Okay, my writing has had a journey all its own. When I was working full-time, I wrote a lot of grants to raise money for nonprofits and for the New York City Department of Education. I wrote a lot of reports, but I also wrote poetry and haiku and enjoyed trying to model my words into the forms of those. I did a lot of journaling as a kid, diary style, and then more discovery style as I got older, finding out what I thought and felt from what I wrote and harvesting old journals. I write an annual holiday letter, which friends are really nudging me to put into a book, and I probably will do that. And I enjoy the creative writing at the New York Writers Coalition. For me, discovery writing or creative writing is really pivotal. And somebody has said, or several people have actually said, how do I know what I think until I see what I've written? And so to examine how I think and how I feel, I do a lot of writing. It gets me in touch with who I am. I think writing, when it's a positive thing in somebody's life, when it comes from inside, from their soul, when it's something they want to do and it's a creative expression, it's very empowering to see, actually, your own voice on the page. It's liberating, and it reduces stress because you can pour out your soul on the page. And if you really love it, you find yourself kind of in a flow state where, the rest of the world is closed out and you don't even know what time it is. But with my group in the Grow Your Grammar situation, they're doing academic writing for the first time in their lives. And I think for them it's stressful because they don't know what they don't know. And they think they're writing well, and then they discover, as one woman did, that she came screaming into class, "I got a C! I never got a C before in my whole life." And when I looked at her paper, I could see why she got the C.
Yes.
So that's a little stressful for them. We cover grammar, punctuation, possessive case, spelling. And those are the kind of obvious things. But
right.
The other things are also how to organize your thoughts in an academic paper, how to follow instructions, and how to use tools like perhaps a mind map to help you organize your thinking, even if you have, a list of instructions from the professor. So if you're doing what they're asking you to do, and if you do it in an organized way that a reader could follow, you've written a very thorough and substantive piece of work academically, and you would do better.
Judy, in preparation for the podcast, a couple of things came up. One of the things that we discussed briefly was the issue of appreciative inquiry and the connection that you and Christine share with Barbara Scher on the Success team. Could you talk about those two things briefly? How I was so impressed when I first was directed to your blog by Christine, and I said, "Oh, this is such beautiful writing." Can you talk about how the blog came about and then how that ties into the appreciative inquiry, which you had showed me earlier?
Okay. Well, the blog is kind of a funny story. I joined the Barbara Scher Success team with 5 other people. Each of us came to the team, as you know, with a goal, a kind of a goal. Mine was to write a book. But I was really having trouble getting started because I had 2 or 3 books in my mind, and I was trying to think, which one did I have the most information about, where did I want to start, and I was just really stymied. So the group suggested I should do a blog. And I thought, why should I do a blog? I'm not focused on one thing. I'm what Barbara Sher calls a scanner. I'm not a deep diver. My interests are so broad. But they really felt I should do a blog. Anyway, in the process of this, I told them a story about something in my life, about when I worked for the Department of Education, and a few blocks away there was a teacher's supply store. And in that supply store, they sold all kinds of pencils with all kinds of motivational sayings written on them. And I bought a package called Caught Doing Good. Each pencil had Caught Doing Good on it. And I decided that wherever I went, I would, if I saw somebody doing something good, I would give them a pencil and show them that I noticed and that I appreciated what they were doing. And in this story, I gave the example of a bus driver. It was a very rainy, dark night in New York. It was about 5 o'clock. People were coming out of work. I was on a bus that was getting very crowded, and people were kind of antsy, and there was no more room on the bus, and it was pouring rain, pitch black dark. But the bus driver saw across the street a woman wheeling her child in a wheelchair, trying to come across the street and get this bus. And he waited for her. And when she got there, he lowered the lift, and he made everybody move to the back even tighter than they were, and got her and her child with its leg out in one of those wheelchairs where one leg is up, got them into the bus so they would not have to wait in the rain. I thought it was wonderful. And the people on the bus, as grouchy as they might have felt at the moment, also thought it was wonderful. And when I got off the bus, I gave him one of those pencils, and I told him, what you just did, I caught you doing good. This was just amazing. It was fabulous. I'm hoping he felt really good about that. I felt really good about witnessing it. So when I told the group this story at my success team, they said, oh, you have to call your blog Caught Doing Good. So I said, I really don't know if I want to do a blog. And he said, well, one of the guys said, well, if you don't, I'm going to use that name and I'm going to do it. So I guess there is a competitor in me. I went racing home. I called a dear friend, the Reverend Dr. Tony LaMotta in Sarasota, Florida, who had been wanting me to do a blog and wanted to help me. And at midnight that night, we put up the blog. It wasn't eventually titled Caught Doing Good. That's a subsection now. But we had a good time putting it together, and I have had a really great time adding bits and pieces to it.
Judy, listening to you, there are 2 things that struck me. One, can you tell us, in the example that you gave, tell our audience, when you gave the bus driver the pencil, what was his reaction, and then what was the reaction of the other people that witnessed that? Could you give us some insight into what was going on? Paint a picture for us.
Well, the bus driver just smiled and nodded. He looked very surprised. The passengers didn't really react because I said it very softly as I was getting off the bus, just as a kind of coda to the ride. So, but I think he felt appreciated for what he had done, and at least that's my prayer.
The reason I mentioned that is that when you first talked about Caught Doing Good, what it made me think of what David Pete, who's a physicist in Pari, Italy, who has the Pari Center, he wrote a book several years ago called Gentle Action. And in that book, he talks about how the process of doing small, kind acts can have a magnified effect. The metaphor is the flapping wings of a butterfly in Hong Kong can have effects in what happens in New York City. And so in the everyday world, that seems very far-fetched. However, what I was thinking of is what you're doing with the caught doing good, and as it spreads, it's like the concept of throwing a pebble or a rock into a still pond, and then the ripple effect. So it would be interesting to follow up with people who have had kind acts done to them, and then, for example, that bus driver, then maybe he went home and he did something, or he did another kind act, and then that person did another kind act. And so that's what I'm suggesting. Just even listening to your story, it quickens the pulse. But also I'm thinking of what of the mother and child, instead of being left, as I think everyone who's ever taken a bus anywhere have seen a bus driver drive off, and the person either bang on the door or, the level of what we call the moment of disappointment. So I would imagine that would have changed the day for that mother and child also.
Sure. I can tell you a story in the reverse when it happened to me. I had a friend who was very poor and broke, and in cleaning out his house, he found an envelope with $200 in it. And he knew that my, in those days, CD player had just broken, and at New Year's he gave me the envelope with the $200 to buy a new one because he knew music was important to me. And I barely could take it, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. So I took it, and of course I spent it on music. But what it did for me as the recipient is that now every year at Christmas I pick somebody out. It could be a friend, could be a salesperson, could be a stranger, whom I've really watched do amazing things for others, or even for themselves, or in their family, or in the community. And I sit down and I tell them the story of my getting the money. I tell them at Christmas, and then I hand them over $200. And generally I get tears and crying. And in the case of one person, a janitor at a place where I used to work, he told me later that he had a sister who was a little more well-off than he, and that based on his experience of getting my $200, that she made a promise to the universe that every Christmas she was going to give somebody $200.
Wow.
So I think it does have exactly that effect.
I think it does. That's really lovely. As you're speaking, Judy, it reminds me, or I think this is the experience of your circle of life planning, that one act leads to another act, leads to this positive response in a person. Certainly the work that you do teaching adults, and you said they've never been in this academic setting before, and you're giving them a tool they didn't have before, that they can, too, be caught doing good, because they didn't experience having to write this way before. It's something that they're, afraid of, and they find out, wow, I can do this. This is a skill that I can learn.
Yeah.
And you mentioned also the journaling, and as a way of expressing yourself, or as a therapeutic tool. And I know sometimes some people get caught in writing in negativity. I know Bob, sometimes he was surprised. What's in that journal? With the story of the little kid trying to see his sister's diary. And in your own writing, you've, as you mentioned with your blog, one thing leads to another to another. This ability to express yourself and to connect it to your life seems a very empowering experience. Have you found that in your own life?
Yes, I found that in my own life, and that's what I want my students to feel. I need to separate, though, the academic writing from other kinds of writing. When I first meet students in my Grow Your Grammar class, they sometimes bring me things that they've written outside of school. And I really try to encourage them. Your writing is beautiful. The words are gorgeous. The thought comes across. It's really clear what you're saying. It may not be academically acceptable or correct, to put those words in quotes, but the ability for self-expression and creative expression is there. It's deep in the person. So I don't want them to think they can't write. They can write. They can write stunningly and poignantly and in a way that really touches the reader. what they have to learn is this new way of writing grammatically correctly. And, all of us have struggled with this. I mean, I remember diagramming sentences as a kid, and I couldn't do it now, for sure. But I try to make my class humorous and funny and drawn from their life experiences, so it's stuff that they have in common and they could laugh at. That's really something they know well, their own life. And then I'm just adding meaning. They can place it wherever they want in making meaning of their life, but they find ways to use it other than just in a paper. For example, if I'm teaching, the possessive case, I take a phrase out of, modern parlance, which I say to them, what do you call a male person who's the father of an infant? And they say, or I say, because they don't ever risk, because they're sure they'll be wrong sometimes. I say, well, on TV I've even heard them say, and in the street, baby daddy. I say, baby daddy, that's not possessive. It's supposed to be baby's daddy, apostrophe S. Baby daddy says to me, a very teeny little daddy, maybe an inch high. And they roar because they can picture it now. And they get to think about it. And every time they hear baby daddy, I know in their minds they're saying, no, it's baby's daddy, because this is a very tiny daddy.
There's a place for the apostrophe in life. I think so many of us have challenges with grammar, and when we come to this place and we're deciding what should it be, and we'll say, where's Judy? We'll have to call her and ask her, where does this apostrophe go?
Likewise, I have somebody I call and ask all the time. So yeah, I know about that. Another one was omitting the word like as punctuation in a sentence. This is the thing you, I think, reacted to in my blog.
Yes, we both, Bob and I, love that piece. And what he says, his eyes tend to glaze over when you talk about grammatical rules, but they serve a place.
Well, what I would say as a clarifying point is that the glazing over takes place when I start talking, if I'm in cocktail conversation and they want to discuss whether or not a direct or indirect object should qualify in a gerund phrase as a verb intransitive, or the nuances between an M dash and an N dash and a colon and a semicolon, and where it becomes very lively conversation, I find that very dull.
Well, it is. It does perk your ears up, put it that way.
So, in fact, I remember speaking to a reference librarian one time, and I said, oh, well, good grammar is important. However, I think when it gets to the point when, for example, in publishing, when they have a meeting and or 2 or 3 meetings to decide on the size of a period, then that to me seems to be a little extreme, especially since we're fighting against a tide of where people don't even know that there are 8 parts of speech anymore.
Judy, I'm sure you find this in your teaching, not just, the classroom work you're doing, but any courses that you give on request, that, as you say, there are many different types and styles of writing, from journal writing to the academic writing to creative writing to self-discovery. And I think sometimes when adults are either writing in business or going back to school, there's that tension that you talk about, that some people get caught up in one part and they're not fluid in expressing. And I think that's the fun. As a Barbara Scheer Success Team graduate myself, I'm familiar with that term, scanner, and perhaps on one of our future podcasts we'll talk about scanners, that your blog is a way you can fulfill your desire to do these different types of a different focus with your writing, and to really give creative expression to your thoughts.
Yes, and it's so much fun for me. It really is. I know the thoughts are unrelated, which is why I'm so grateful that there are categories.
Judy, in talking about this blog, we have not told our listeners, where can they find you on the web?
Well, it's judithlukin.com. That's the blog. And email would be at inspiredoutcomes@verizon.net. That's if anybody wanted to get in touch with me without going through the blog.
Okay, wonderful. Tell us a little bit about the courses that you offer, and they can contact you for more information about this.
Well, I kind of see myself as a thought partner. Originally, I was going to say coach, but I think thought partner is better because my joy is helping people think through stuff. So the Circle of Life course is a life planning. It's not really a course. It's a life planning process, which starts with getting in touch with who you are and how you learn, and then examines your strengths and skills and gives you permission that you don't have to do something just because you're really good at it. And then the grammar course is all the things I mentioned before, plus organizing the paper or the whatever the writing is.
All right, so we can contact you at Judith Lukin. That's JudithLukin.com. JudithLukin.com is the website where we can read your blogs, and Bob and I completely enjoy so much.
Thank you.
What you've
Thank you
there.
so much.
You're very welcome. And you can be reached at email at inspiredoutcomes@verizon.com.
.net.
.net, I apologize. So that's inspiredoutcomes@verizon.net. Judith, I want to thank you so much. You have been wonderful.
Judy, before we go, I'd like you to wrap up by asking you what final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
Actually, I had two. The first is that there's something empowering in seeing your thoughts captured in your own writing. So folks should write anything, write a lot, write freely, and then they'll discover their own inspired outcomes. The second is that empowerment, which we've talked about, is an inside job. You get there by recognizing and honoring your own gifts and strengths and your authentic core, which is your own personal integrity. So I wish everybody joy on the journey.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy. And I want to thank our audience for listening. Audience, no matter where you're listening, in whatever time zone you're listening, you can start to feel better right away. We welcome and look forward to receiving your comments about the show. So please let us know if there are topics you'd like to see us cover or guests we've had in the past that you'd like us to invite back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us and learn how you can get control of your schedule, including easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. That's 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and your first session is absolutely free. Call today to schedule your appointment. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.